general screen, I guess. That's what I'd call it. Sweet. Well, this is a great turnout. I'm excited. See a couple familiar squares, and well, I guess technically they're rectangles, but whatever. There's a few of you I met last week, and then a few of you are new, which is awesome. I'm super stoked about this. So for those who are new, my name is Ben Turner. I'm a software engineer at Fidelity. This series is something I created with the help of Mo and Matt, just to help people who are kind of just beginning their journey into tech. I like this to be a resource for them. So these are weekly, and I like to just choose kind of a topic every week that I think is important. So this week's topic is just some context around web development. So it's basically a very quick crash course into web development. It's a huge field, of which I've been doing this for about 4 years, and I still feel every day like I've only scratched the surface of what's possible out there. So super exciting. It can be really intimidating too. So hopefully my goal is to kind of at least provide a context so that you don't get too overwhelmed when you're learning this stuff. So, Zoom is kind of a weird, well, it's a little bit hard to do these things over Zoom. I like to have my class, so I used to teach at Vschool, they're a coding bootcamp in Salt Lake City, and I prefer teaching in person. It's just so much more fun and intimate. So I'm used to teaching in that environment. So this is still a little bit new to me. So be patient with me. I appreciate it. So just really quick before we get into it, I'm curious to know what some of you are hoping to get out of today. I'm curious to know why you decided to be here. You know, there's 1,000 other things that you could be doing, and so it's super awesome that you're here. And I just want to make sure that you get your time's worth. So, would anyone like to volunteer what they're hoping to get out of today?
Hi, Matt. This is Sue.
Hey.
Hi.
Yep.
I'm a print designer, and I've been doing that for 20 plus years, and I have a little familiarity with the digital side, but I feel like maybe should I be taking the user experience design course first and then move into the development course? I guess I don't know what my question is, but I'm just trying to figure out where I should start with Vschool.
Cool. So I will say that they're vastly different disciplines. UX design and software development, or web development more specifically, they're totally different. So now they complement each other, obviously. UX designers and developers work together because they're both contributing to to the project, but they're vastly different skill sets. So it's very rare for someone to do both. It's kind of like a mechanical engineer also knowing how to architect buildings.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, so just so you know, they're totally different disciplines. They're different professions, different career paths.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of overlap. It can actually be pretty helpful to at least know some fundamentals of the different fields, but they're very different. But thank you for volunteering. Anyone else want to go?
I can go.
Sure, go ahead.
My name is Nida. I have been a C++, C# developer for 30 years. I'm old.
Wow. That's awesome.
SQL is in there. Our company wants to move more towards presenting things in a web environment. And so they're throwing me in this web stuff, and I'm just trying trying to piece the pieces together. I've been trying to study JavaScript.
Mhm.
20 years ago, I actually took an HTML class, but you know, I have retained about a half a percentage of that.
Yeah, most of
So
that's probably irrelevant now anyways.
yeah, thanks.
Totally different.
Warm, fuzzy feeling there.
Yeah,
So anyway, I was just trying to piece things back together and see how the web works nowadays,
cool.
with
Awesome.
what I know, pull pieces together.
Cool. Well, hopefully I can give you a little bit or demystify a little bit of that for you. Let's do one more person. Anyone want to go?
Probably really quiet. Can anyone hear me?
Barely. I can barely hear you. Looks like
I
you're.
won't go if I'm having some trouble. So if it's too hard to hear, I won't go. But
Oh, now I
is
can
that
hear
better?
you. Now I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Erica. I'm working right now in a web development bootcamp. I'm through like the first quarter right now. I'm switching careers. I was an IT support technician. So right now we're in my class. So we just finished a lot of not front end frameworks, but just a basic DOM and JavaScript, HTML, CSS front end work. And
Cool.
so now we're doing Python and Flask. And so I live in the area, and I just wanted to get to know some other software developers. So
Sweet.
so maybe work on projects together.
Right on. Well, welcome. Glad you are with us. Sweet. All right. Well, let's get started. I'll share my screen. So the way this is going to go is I just kind of want to share some of my experience and some of the knowledge that I have. My knowledge is incomplete, just like everybody else's. I do not know everything, and I could be wrong sometimes, and that's all right. So I'm going to share some of that, and then I want to leave as much time as possible for questions. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, Matt or Mo, whoever is the host, will you allow screen sharing, please?
Matt is actually the host. Let me ping him for you if he doesn't hear us already.
Okay, cool. And if you can tell him to like make me the host or something, if it's easier, then that would work too. Yeah, I forgot to tell him to do that. So anyways, while that's happening, let me send out a link. So this is a brand new series, and I just created a GitHub repository for this series, Code Talk. So I'm going to send it to you guys right now over the Zoom chat. So here is the URL to my repository. It's just, there's not a whole lot there other than just some information about what each episode is about, as well as links and resources and some background information. So it's pretty helpful info. Let me see if he's able to, nope, not quite yet. So does anyone have any questions for me while we're waiting for the screen sharing to enable?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Are you guys are you planning on using this mostly as like a sort of an educational platform, which is great, by the way? I love that. But I was wondering, are you guys planning on doing any like hackathons or group projects or anything like that?
So this is my pet project. So I plan on mostly doing these just weekly event sort of things. Vschool is sponsoring it. I believe that Vschool sometimes does events like that. I think Mo would probably be a good person to ask about those kinds of events, because this right here, this series right here is kind of like an independent thing that I'm managing and hosting with the help of Matt and Mo. So it's not like an official Vschool event, but they are sponsoring it. But Mo would be a good person to ask. Are you on the? So you're not a student of Vschool, right, Erica?
No.
Okay. Mo, sorry, were you about to say something?
You can share your screen now, and
Oh,
yeah,
sweet.
if anyone wants to reach out, it's just mo at vschool.io, and we hold a lot of cool events, and a hackathon. We're well overdue for that. It's been a little while, so yeah, if you just reach out to mo at vschool.io or just go to the website. It's a cool community full of lots of folks from lots of places, and yeah, we'd like to hang out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sweet. All right. So, awesome. I have the power now. So let's do this. All right. Can everybody see this?
Yep.
All right. So here's my little simple repository. So here's episode 2. So there's really kind of 2 things that I want to talk about today. They're kind of different, but they're also equally important. And I wanted to show you guys some resources for these things. So one of the things that I kind of was really confused about when I first started coding and stuff was because it's so abstract, I always struggled with like, how does the computer know how does the computer know what to do? Which of course is a loaded question because, you know, there's from all the way from the hardware up to the you know, compiler level. There's a whole bunch of in-between levels and layers that are kind of happening that you don't see, you know, like coding is hard because it all kind of happens in this black box and it can be kind of hard. There's nothing to see. It's not like a car where you can like see the mechanics of the engine working. Like you can't really see the electrons firing. You don't see a bit. It would be cool if you could, but a bit is a very abstract idea. And data is a very abstract idea. And a programming language is very abstract. So I was always confused about, okay, well, how is it that when I write this text in a file, how is it that suddenly the browser can just like do the thing that I told it to do? And this has to do with how web browsers work. Now, I haven't really looked at the source code or anything for the Chrome browser, but browsers generally all kind of work in a similar way. So the question that I kind of want to look at today is what happens between when you first visit a site and when you see something on the page. Like what's going on there? Because I think it can, and knowing that, at least on a high level, I think can make you appreciate the web a little bit more, or you can at least appreciate the work that web developers do. And it can kind of help you become a better developer if you kind of actually know what's happening. So I have a couple links here that we're going to kind of take a look at. I have stolen these links from one of my favorite resources called, I gotta get these meeting controls out of the way. There's a place that I really like called the Front-End Developer Handbook. And if you haven't heard of this, I mentioned this last week, but if you haven't heard of this, this is the absolute best resource I've ever found for just high-level information about anything web development related. There's just so much good info here. It's amazing. It's kind of overwhelming, but I highly recommend this. So today we're just gonna go in this guy, and there's a couple of, I got most of my links from in here. I would recommend, if you're curious, to check this out. But what we're gonna look at today specifically is web page rendering and how browsers work. So let's take a step back and think about what I just did. I just typed a URL into this bar, and suddenly I see this page show up. It's pretty cool how that works. So why does that work? Why am I able to see that? So the first thing that happens when you actually type in a URL here is your browser is actually making a request over the internet for a file located at that location. And we can even see that if we go into the dev tools, and I'm going to have a whole episode dedicated to just the dev tools because they're pretty important. We're going to take a look at the network tab. We're also going to take a look at the performance tab in a second. And we're going to see what exactly is happening. So for those of you who are not familiar with the dev tools or have kind of sort of used it a little bit, this just kind of gives you, it's kind of like opening the hood in your car. You can kind of see what's going on. So this network tab tells us, it basically gives us information about what our browser is requesting. So if I refresh the page, we should see a bunch of stuff happening. Holy crap, that's awesome. So, all right, what is this? There's a bunch of, okay, so there's some CSS, there's some JavaScript files. In fact, there's quite a few JavaScript files. You can see .js, we got some images, right? We got some PNGs, we got some more CSS, we got some more JS. As you can see, most of these are all JavaScript or CSS files. There's favicon. There is one thing here, though, this is very important. It's this very first one right here. So notice how all these say script or text, CSS or JavaScript or style sheet. This one's a little unique because check it out, we're actually getting a document. Well, that document represents literally the HTML document that we are viewing right now. So we're actually making a request for an HTML document. And this is the request. So in the HTTP protocol, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which is kind of the way that we all communicate over the internet, at least in the web development world. You know, obviously the web is only one part of the internet, but we are making a request following the HTTP protocol. We're saying, I want to see the information located at this spot. It's a GET request, meaning we're asking to retrieve information. We're not trying to post information. We're not creating new information. We're just asking for a page. And we don't need to worry too much about the headers and stuff yet. But it's just good to know that, okay, these are kinds of the things that is clarifying what we expect from the response. So let's look at what we got back. Interesting. It's an HTML page. And we can look at it again this way. This is an even better way. Check it out. This is literally the file that we just got back. And it's just HTML. Pretty cool. Okay, well, that's all great. Does anybody have any questions up to this point?
How did you open that little part? I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow along and I missed it. No, I got
you're
the
good.
name and I got the network and I
Mhm.
saw the big list like you have. I
Mhm.
just wanted to see the headers and response and preview, how you got that little tab to come up.
So that tab should just exist.
I don't see anything after waterfall. There you go. What did you do to do that?
I exited out of it. If I refresh or if I
So if I right click on it or something, or no?
so you just go to network and then you'll have to refresh to see the stuff. And then when you click on, so what you do is you click on the actual request. I'm going to click on the document type. It's the very first one.
Okay.
And then you'll see this guy up here. Yep. And this just contains the headers and the payload that we sent to the server.
Thank you.
Yep. So, all right, so this is the HTML that we've received. Okay, cool. All right, well, if we look at this, we can see that there's some links here. And as you can see, there's like some CSS up there, and then back down here, there's probably some scripts. Yep, there they are, boom, all there. Cool, all right, so basically we get fed this HTML, and then the HTML file then has all these other additional links, which then asks for more and more files. That's why we keep seeing all these network requests here, because every time you see a link here or a script or an image or something, we basically have to make a new request for that information. And that's what each one of these individual requests are, for the most part. So, okay, well, that's great and all, but how does it make it? We all know that CSS is the thing that makes your HTML look pretty, and it lets you determine layout. And we all know that JavaScript is the programming language that the web is basically based on. But how does that all happen? Like, how is it that it knows to style that green? How does it know to make this into an anchor tag? Stuff like that. Like, where does this functionality and styling and layout come from? So to answer that question, we're going to actually look at another tab. And this is a tab that I think is very underrated. I don't use it as much as I probably should, but it is the Performance tab. And notice what we're basically going to do is we're going to tell Chrome to record our session, or not really a session. We're going to record our visit. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the Control-Shift-E to start, or to record the page load. And it'll do this whole thing. Takes a second.
Hey, Ben, while you're waiting for that to load, you did have a question from David in the chat.
Oh, all right. Sorry, I can't. It's hard for me to see the chat and share at the same time. Let me. I'd be happy to look at that. Oh crap. Where's the? Oh, I made my. So hid my controls. Do you mind just asking the question?
Yeah, sure. He said he was wondering where you requested the page from, or where is it stored, or kind of where all that works from.
Oh, you're asking where, like, where do these files come from? Like, so when I visit this page, like, who is it that gives them to me?
Yeah, his wording, he said, where did you request the page from? Where is it stored? A server?
Yeah, so that's correct. So every a URL just represents a location on the internet somewhere. That's not exactly right, but it represents a location or an address. And there's a whole process for determining whether or not a given URL is, valid or it actually exists. But basically, there's a server somewhere that someone has given or created these files and said, hey, server, here you go. When someone visits you and goes to this URL, here's the files that I want you to send. That's roughly what is going on. So whoever is managing this site basically has these files given to a hosting service. So who knows who's the hosting service for this site? But you've heard of course, GoDaddy and DreamHost and all those other hosting services. Basically, you can when you set up an account and stuff, you provide the files that you want to be served from that location. So whoever is in charge of this has purchased the domain name frontendbabel.info and has provided these files there so that when I go to this website, I'm requesting from that server whatever files are located at that address. Does that answer the question?
He said, yes, thank you, in case you can't see the chat still.
Awesome. Yeah, so I can't see it. I hid the controls and now I can't remember what the hotkey is to unhide them.
Zoom can be fun.
I know, right? There's a few UX things that they need to figure out. Anyways, so yeah, that's basically how that works. Okay, so now let's take a look at this mess here. Now this looks insane. This is a lot of information, and I would expect anyone to be completely overwhelmed looking at this. So if you're overwhelmed, that's okay, so am I. But we can at least, we can navigate this in a pretty simple way. So we are first going to step back and be like, all right, what did I just do? I just made a request to a server and they just gave me a HTML file back. Okay, cool. So let's start there. We have just been given an HTML file. That's something that I think all of us can relate to. And if we look at this section here, how do browsers render a web page? These are basically the steps that the browser takes in order to go from that initial load of the HTML file to seeing something on the page. The very first thing is we get the HTML. And the HTML is then parsed. All that means is that you get this, you go from a text file to what's called the document object model, the DOM tree. Basic parsing is just a process for translating a string input or a file input into a structure that the browser can understand. So the same thing happens for the CSS. So there's what's called the CSS object model. So those are loaded and those are also parsed, and those are also created into some sort of tree. And a larger tree called the render tree, or the render object, whatever, different browsers call them different things. But you get a combination of the DOM and the CSS OM, and they basically get combined. And once that happens, you now have a tree structure, basically. You have this tree, and it's easier to and it's actually pretty easy to visualize, because we can actually basically look at it. Come on, brother. There we go. If we look at the Elements tab, here's our tree, right? The body is kind of the trunk. Well, technically the HTML is the trunk. We've got two big limbs, and then the limbs get smaller and smaller and smaller, just like a tree, and it just nests further and further and further down. So once we have that tree, then the browser can then go through, calculate the coordinates of all of those squares, all of those nodes, which is called the layout phase or layout step. And then it gets painted. Painting means literally it gets painted to the screen or displayed to the screen. So it goes from parsing an HTML file to combining the style tree and the DOM tree together into the render tree. The coordinates are then calculated, which is the layout step, and then the paint step. Those are the basic steps involved. There's also a step where the scripts are run, but we'll talk about that in a second. So let's go back to the Performance tab, and with that in mind, we can now kind of look at what's happening. So, all right, this right here, this area is basically a visualization of what is happening on the page at any given time. So it's a graph. So from left to right is time. See how there's 879 milliseconds, there's 1879, 2879. So they're in increments of 1,000 milliseconds. I'm not sure why it stops at 879, but that's just what's going on. And these different colors just represent different processes. So you can just see this graph as a function of different processes happening at a given point in time. So down here, things are broken down into different types of processes. We're only going to worry about the network and the frames. That's really all I care about for our purposes. Oh, and the main, which we'll look at in a second. Okay, so first of all, network. This shows us what network processes are happening from the moment we loaded the page until the end of what our performance recording did. So let's take a look at what just happened. And we can expand and shrink this area. So this white part is what we see. If it's grayed out, we're not seeing it. So we can expand and shrink this area as much as possible. So I'm gonna go right from the beginning, which is right here. We're just gonna take a look at this little snippet here, and we're gonna see what's going on. So obviously, so at the 59 millisecond mark, let's look at what happened. Hey, look, there is a network request to, well, not surprisingly, the website that we want to visit. Of course, that would be the first thing that happens. And that takes, looks like, roughly 239 milliseconds or estimated. Okay, then let's look what happens. All right, well, it looks like there's some CSS that loads. Okay, and look, there's some pictures that get loaded. Okay, cool. Let's see what else happens. At around the 6:19 millisecond mark, we've got some more pictures, and then we've got, we got a JavaScript file. Okay, okay. That goes on, and then there's more JavaScript, and then there's more JavaScripts, and then there's more and more stuff happening. But you'll notice that these are, everything in yellow here is just JavaScript. And we could, I'm not sure if I can, yeah, so we can shrink that a little bit more. All right, cool. So what we're looking at right now are just all the files that are basically getting loaded. There are a bunch of JavaScript files and pictures and CSS. And I'm not sure if there's, I can't really see anything else other than that. Oh, more CSS, some SVGs, cool. So that's all that's happening there. It's just showing us all the files, all the extra files that we're getting back in addition to that initial file there. Any questions so far about this? And feel free to just like stop me if you have a question. Just speak up, it's easier.
Hi there, I had a question. So you're on Chrome, is that right?
Yep.
And that would be Chrome Developer Tools to see that panel on the right?
Yep.
Okay. Do you know offhand if there's something similar for Safari? I suppose I should get Chrome
there
anyway.
is, but it's probably garbage because
Okay.
Safari is not a very good browser for developing on.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep. Cool. All right, so that's the network stuff, more or less. All right, let's look at the next thing, which is we're going to take a look at this main section. And notice how when I hover over this, it would, if I were on a more complicated site, you would see the snapshot changing over time. But as you can see, as I hover over this, you can see what the page looks like at a given time, which is kind of cool. Nothing, it doesn't really look that different because it's just a static site. There's not a whole lot going on. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this main section. Okay, let's look at what's happening here. So you're going to notice that there's some things called events, and you're going to see things like function calls, and you're going to see tasks. You're going to see evaluate scripts. Anything in yellow is going to be relevant to the JavaScript. The first thing, though, I want to point out is this blue thing here. This is where the HTML first gets parsed, which makes sense because the very first thing that we got, of course, is an HTML file. And like this thing says, the first thing we should get is the HTML file. Okay, great. So it parses it. And as it goes down, you'll kind of see this cascading because these processes are all happening simultaneously, right? So we get the HTML, which is parsing. Oh, it hits a script tag, so that's going to start evaluating the script. And then it's going to get, you know, more and more things are going to be happening as you go down. And we could zoom in on them if we wanted, but this is just high level stuff. Okay, we hit another script tag, goes on, cool, cool, cool. All right, let's see if we can find something interesting. I'm gonna shrink this down a little bit more so that maybe we can see something happening. All right, so there's our parsed HTML, and hey, look at this, here's our layout. And if you remember, the layout step was right here, where it determines where things should be, where they should display. Again, that's layout. Okay, there's some other stuff, and you'll see that it looks like this page is actually recalculating things quite a bit, which can be good or bad. And you'll notice how this kind of happens in cycles. Okay, there's parsing HTML again, there's a function call, and there's some other stuff happening. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Let's make this even smaller and see if we can see. Oh, more recalculating styles. If any of you have done any web development before, you might recognize this function here, append child. You've probably used it before. And yeah, you basically get a bird's eye view of literally everything happening on the page up until the very end, which is, you know, 6 or 7 seconds later, when everything kind of calms down and the page has been loaded and we're all good. But basically, throughout that 7 seconds, this process has been happening over and over and over again. So it's pretty cool. Does anybody have any questions?
Sue had a question in chat, which I attempted to answer, but I think you might have a better answer. She said, who is dictating the load time, Chrome or something set in the developer's code?
Who is determining the load time? That's a good question. So it depends on a lot of things. Load time is determined by a lot of things. First thing, the load time can be influenced by how large the initial file is. So if I have a web application that is just one giant HTML file that's, I don't know, let's say it's 10 gigs, which would be huge, but let's say it's 10 gigs. Then it doesn't matter how fast your internet connection is or how fast your browser or computer is, that's a big file to send over the network. So that can be an influencing factor. Another thing that can influence, besides the file size, is the number of files. So as you can see, if we look at the network tab, that's a lot of files. I mean, that's, I don't know, it's like 25 files maybe. Oh, actually, even more than that. A lot. It's quite a few. So if there were, for some reason, 5,000 files that needed to be loaded in addition to that initial HTML file, then that could add up. That could very much influence the time. Also, the network speed, obviously, would influence it. The browser could influence it as well. If you're using like a really, really old browser, potentially, perhaps. Another thing that can influence load time is how complicated these scripts are that run. Like maybe you have some fancy animation on your page that you use, that perhaps was not written very efficiently. If you are constantly painting and repainting and repainting and painting, then the browser is going to seem slow. So there's a lot of things that can influence load time, and they're not necessarily any particular thing's fault. It could be some combination of all those as well. So I hope that helps.
So you kind of touched on something there that I was wondering, when we're looking at like this graph here of all the files loading and the time it takes, is that purely just for transferring, or like if it is a JavaScript file, does that time to load include the execution of the script?
So that's a good question. So no, it does not include the time to execute the script. It's just the time. These are solely network requests. These are just the time it took between the initial request and the response.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because the execution, there's no guarantee that even a file that you're getting immediately is, you know, that could be something that is constantly being executed. Perhaps you have some loop that is just always listening. That would, of course, influence the, you know, if that's just ongoing, then it would never end until you ended the browser. So this is just network requests.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. So to recap, when you visit a site, you are requesting a HTML file from a server. The server provides an HTML. Your browser then parses that HTML, compiles it into a render tree based on the DOM and the CSS tree. And it then determines the layout. It calculates based on that tree. It then determines the location or the coordinates of each node on that tree, and then it paints it to the browser window, and that's ultimately what you see. So one part that can be kind of confusing though about this is, okay, well, where does the JavaScript come into play? Well, when the browser sees a JavaScript file, so for example, let's go to the network and look at the HTML file that we were given. Okay, so let's go ahead and try to find a script tag. It's probably at the bottom somewhere. Let's find the very first one. Almost. Here we go. All right, here's a script. So as the DOM is parsing this, it sees the script tag and goes, oh, let's run it. And that's why you see in the performance tab that let me go back here. If we look at this little area. There it is, okay. My mouse is freaking out. Okay, I don't know why it's not letting me scroll. All right. When we look at this, here we go. Here's the parsing HTML, but notice it sees that script almost immediately. And we'll start running that, and it will continue executing. So it just will continue parsing and executing scripts until there's no more to run. And every browser has a built-in JavaScript engine, which is responsible for executing JavaScript. Chrome has one called the, I totally just spaced it, what it's called. It's the same one, the V8. It's called the V8 engine. No relation to the ones that are found in cars, obviously. Yeah, so it just will run the script until the program is done, and you then you've got your site. And then whatever sorts of things that you decide to do on the site, such as clicking around or scrolling or whatever, whatever JavaScript is there to handle that sort of thing, it will happen. Cool. So I'm running a little bit over time. I wanted to talk briefly about the development cycle. But first of all, I want to open up to some questions because we've got about 15 minutes.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lily. My question is, do browsers have different I don't know, engines, I guess, that load JavaScript? And if so, which ones are better than others or the best?
That's a great question. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. Every browser has a different engine. Well, some browsers I think share the same engine. That one I don't really remember. But Chrome, like I said, has the V8, which is, my understanding is that by most metrics, it's the best. It's definitely the fastest. It's definitely become kind of the standard. And it's also the same engine that was used in Node. I don't know if you are familiar with Node or have used it, but basically Node decided to just take the JavaScript runtime engine out of the browser and just use it independently. Because it's a good engine. I honestly don't know much about engines, to be frank, but I know that the Firefox uses a different kind. I don't remember what it's called. Spider Monkey, that's what it's called. I don't know who comes up with these names, but there's that one. And then I don't know what Safari uses. Probably like Cocoa, I guess. I've never heard of that. But there's that. Every browser has a different one. What's another browser? There's one that no one ever uses. Oh yeah, Internet Explorer. Chakra. So there you go. To answer your question, yes, there are different ones. The Chrome one seems to be the best one, although the Firefox is very, very comparable.
Yeah, I think I have the best experience, like user experience on Chrome.
Yeah, and the like Firefox and Chrome are the two best browsers for web development, in my opinion. I think Edge is trying really hard to be relevant, but no one wants to use Edge because it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth because it is too much like Internet Explorer.
Yeah, I thought it was just like an updated version of Internet Explorer. My laptop came with Edge, and I was like,
Yeah,
I don't really want it.
It is quite a bit better. I mean, it's way, 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 way better, but it's kind of like the party's over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Sure does. Thanks.
Cool. All right, keep them coming.
I've got another quick one, hopefully relating to engines. If you don't know the answer, it's fine. I'm just kind of curious. With different browsers using different engines, do you run into things like with CSS where there's like cross compatibility issues where you have JavaScript that might not work correctly in certain engines, or do they all pretty much function the same, just at different ways?
That is a fantastic question. So unfortunately, yes, it does cause problems. I can point to a very, very specific problem that I've encountered at work so the way to think about this is the JavaScript engine, it's not so much the engine's fault though. It's actually the browser's environment that it provides. So for example, I'm gonna open up a fake little blank website here, or a blank page. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to just display the window object. And for those who are not familiar with the window, or are maybe a little bit confused as what it is, it's basically the global scope. It's kind of where everything lives as far as the DOM, and it's where all of the JavaScript, all the native JavaScript functions are provided. So if we look at this, we will be able to see things that you should be familiar with, such as the alert. So it's what allows me to do this. So the window is what provides that function. And all of these guys. Document is on here, which I would imagine most of you have used before, right? Document.getElementById for those of you who do React. So the document lets you, basically the window object is the global object for everything. It provides everything. And what's interesting is while the different JavaScript engines are effectively the same, some are more efficient than others. The difference though between browsers is that the window object is not the same. So if you were to look at the if you were to look at the window objects for Internet Explorer, Firefox, and Chrome, and all of them together, you would see a difference between them. Not much. I mean, if they were too different, then it would be a disaster. They all fundamentally are the same, but there's some things that are missing. So for example, if you go to, there's a function called, and so I found this in work, or at work. There is a function called closest, which tells you what is closest to a given element. So for example, let's say I create an element. Let's make a div. Okay, cool. And then we'll just say document.body.append child, and we'll append the div. Okay, cool. If we look at the elements now, we're going to see this div here. Okay, cool. Let's give that an ID. Oh, that's not the right one. Anyways, it doesn't matter. So I've got this div, and I want to know what's the closest element to it. I'm going to say div.closest, and I want to find, hey, look at that. I found the closest element called the body, which this is a trivial example because there's only one body ever. But anyways, it gives you the idea where, okay, well, it looks like there is a method called closest that exists on all div elements, and in fact, all HTML elements. However, in Internet Explorer, that is not the case. And I learned this the hard way when I thought I was done with this feature for our project. And it just so happens that if you look at the compatibility, no, there is no .closest function that exists in Internet Explorer. And that is because this window object, it actually lives in the HTML div element constructor, which is, I don't know, somewhere down here. I don't know where it is. Ah, there it is. Yeah, if you were to look at this in Internet Explorer, you would not see it listed. It would not be, where is it? There's a function. There's supposed to be a function in here. Maybe it doesn't list the functions. Oh, it's probably on the HTML, perhaps. Anyways, you got to if you dig down here far enough, you find it. But in Internet Explorer, it's not there. And so I was getting an error at work where basically I was this drag and drop feature that I was building depended on this closest function, and in Internet Explorer it didn't work, so the whole thing just crashed. So that was fun. That was fun to fix. Not really. It wasn't not that fun.
Cool. That's interesting. I hadn't considered that. I've seen those compatibility charts on the MDN for like all the CSS stuff, but never paid attention to the bottom of like the JavaScript function pages.
Yep. Yeah. So this is anytime you're Googling and you're looking up DOM functions, it's usually not a bad idea to check down here because there's some like really cool newfangled things like scroll into view. This one is fairly new, and as you can see, it doesn't exist in Safari. Sometimes they're experimental. So yeah, it's definitely a good thing to check.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Does anybody else have any other questions? We can take maybe one or two. Don't be shy.
In the chat, C said, this is great informative. Does Vschool offer webinars like this for the UX UI side of things?
As far as I know, I don't think so. This is just a thing that I just kind of decided to do because I like teaching and I miss it, and I don't get to do it at my job very much. But definitely be a cool thing for them to try. And again, you could always talk to Mo. He's awesome. But at this point, I do not think that it is a thing, but it's with enough interest, I'm sure it could be. Let's see here. I'm gonna try to get my chat back up because it's kind of annoying me that I can't see anything. Cool. Well, are there any more questions? I'm happy to answer anything, even if it's not necessarily related to this particular thing. Cool. Well,
I did have a question. I wonder if this video might be stored online somewhere where I can rewatch it once I get developer tools going.
Oh shit, I totally forgot to hit record. Ah, damn it. Well, it's supposed to be, but I didn't hit record. That was my bad. Although actually, I wonder if Matt recorded it. He is, let me ask him really quick. I don't think he's in here anymore, but I'll ask him. I am planning on, making like a website where I kind of compile everything in one place. Like I said, this is a brand new thing, so I'm still working out the kinks.
Are you talking about recording this session?
Yeah.
It does say in the top left of our screen that it's recording. I don't know if.
Oh, perfect. Okay, awesome.
For you.
It looks like Matt recorded it or started that process, so we should be good. So yeah, we will eventually have a site where we'll have everything like listed. I'm working on the layout for that right now. But so far everything's just going to be in the GitHub site that I posted earlier. But I am going to do an entire thing on DevTools, just so you know. So if you're really interested in learning more about the DevTools one, that is either next week or the week after. Which one is it? One sec, just looking it up. Yeah, next week is, I'm gonna do a Chrome Dev crash course, or a Chrome DevTool crash course. So feel free to join in for that one. Yeah. So is there any other questions before we sign off? Cool. Well, just to recap, this site is where I'll be posting every new episode. Usually I'll have it done like a day or two in advance. And I'll just have some resources and links that are related to that particular thing. Thanks again to Vschool for sponsoring this. If you are interested in registering, I've got a link to Vschool there. And when you apply, if you put in Code Talk, or make sure to put in Code Talk when you apply. And then there's also, Vschool provides a free bootcamp primer course. So for those who have not started a course or whatever, this is a good place to see if it's something you're interested in. So yeah, well, thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks again, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Yep.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Thank you.